Hi there. I'm rerunning an episode from June on Neptune because Neptune is about to end up at the very last degree of the zodiac for the third time since last year. And that's happening at the beginning of March before Neptune leaves the sign of Pisces to enter Aries. Um, and and I think it's really applicable as well because there's been a lot of Pisces energy lately as Venus has been there and the North Node moved into Pisces. So I think it's applicable. You'll notice in this episode, I talk about having this brain fog, which I think is so funny looking back because, for one, I didn't know I had COVID, which Neptune rules like sneaky damn viruses like that. And also just fog. Neptune is foggy, makes things foggy and confused. So very appropriate. But anyway, I'm away on solo retreat this week. And I should have an episode for you next week, a new one. So enjoy this one. Thanks. Bye bye. Hello, and welcome to Conscious Curiosities, where we unlock the wisdom of the universe that lies within us. I'm Maria Luz, your host, an astrologer, certified hypnotist, and psychic medium. Today's episode is all about Neptune, and we are going to do as we usually do and go through the mythology, the astronomy, and finally the astrology of Neptune. So, first to the mythology. Neptune was also known as Poseidon. So, as we've seen, these gods and goddesses have a Greek name and a Roman name, but they're basically the same gods with the same different stories or mythology. And like his siblings, he was swallowed immediately after his mother, Rhea, gave birth to him by his father, Saturn or Kronos. Because Saturn had heard this this prophecy that one of his children would be his downfall. So he was just popping them like candies after they were born. And then eventually Rhea pleaded with the sons, and Zeus kind of took the lead and busted them out. And then they ended up becoming the Olympians who overthrew Saturn and the Titans. And after this victory, the Olympians, so Poseidon and Zeus and Hades, they drew lots, and then they each got one of the parts of the world. And so Poseidon drew the lot for the sea as his domain. And then some of the myths that are representative of Neptune's character and that kind of lead to the things associated with Neptune are that he entered a contest with the goddess Athena to rule Athens, and he produced the very first horse as a gift. But the king refused him the prize, and Poseidon got all pissed off, and he caused a drought. So both horses and droughts are also associated with Neptune or Poseidon. And then another thing is that if you remember my episode on Ceres or Ceres, also known as Demeter, when Demeter was off like walking all over the earth, searching for her daughter Persephone, who had been taken down to the underworld by Hades, but Ceres didn't know this, so she was looking all over the place, and Neptune took this shape of a horse and assaulted her. And he just had this habit of also seducing all kinds of nymphs and mortal women, and he was often like disguised as a horse or an animal or flowing water. And I think the character in The Little Mermaid, King Triton, I think he's based on Neptune or, Poseidon, the god of the sea. And yeah, then moving on to the astronomy, Neptune is the eighth and the most distant planet from the sun in our solar system, and it's the fourth largest. And it was the first to be discovered using mathematical calculations. So I think what happened, if I remember correctly, is that when they discovered Uranus and they kind of started watching its orbit, they thought like, oh, it looks like there must be something in the way there. So they kind of knew generally where a planet should be based on Neptune's orbit around the sun. And they kept looking. I mean, we had telescopes and everything, but they were like, there's nothing there. And so they overlooked it several times before they finally spotted it. And it was just like exactly where it was calculated it should be. And so this kind of like hidden parts of the archetype, this will come into play when I talk about that in the astrology portion. So just keep that in mind, that the physical planet was also hidden in plain sight. And so it's composed mostly of hydrogen, helium, and methane. And it's the methane that causes it to appear blue, because as methane absorbs red light, it reflects blue off. And it has 14 moons. And Triton is the largest and was the first to be discovered just like a couple of weeks after Neptune was discovered. And I believe in the mythology, Triton is Neptune's sons, or one of his sons. So one day on Neptune, so when it revolves around its axis, is 16 hours. And then one orbit around the sun takes 165 Earth years. And and I think that makes it in its sign about, no, I can't do the math, but I want to say it's about 16 years or 14 years, maybe 14, that it's in each sign. Okay, so for the astrology, Neptune is associated with the sign of Pisces and the 12th house. And you may hear that you may have heard of Hellenistic astrology, which goes back to the ancient Greek astrology. And so there are many astrologers who still carry on this lineage. And so they don't look at the planets that hadn't been discovered with the naked eye. Okay, so for them, although Neptune might be associated with with Pisces, you'll see that in Hellenistic astrology, Jupiter is actually the ruler of Pisces and associated with the 12th house. So you may see those things, but those people who practice more modern astrology, they tend to name Neptune as the ruler of Pisces. So it gets a little confusing, and it's not like it's this big drama in the astrological world or anything, but I'm just pointing it out in case you consult different sources and you see different things. And the reason why Neptune is relevant right now. Sorry, I'm having like a Neptune brain fog day, and I keep like looking out the window instead of at my notes. But okay, so Neptune is at the last degree of Pisces, and that is, if you remember, the zodiac wheel starts at Aries and goes, counterclockwise 1 to 12, with the last sign at the last house being Pisces and the 12th house. And so being at the very last degree of Pisces is also being at the very last degree of that zodiac wheel. And I wanted to start with the Sabian symbol. And remember, these were channeled in 1925 in Balboa Park by this psychic named Elsie Wheeler. And they were written down as sort of like a poem by Mark Edmund Jones. And so there's a short little type of fragment of a sentence really, and then there's a more like poetic kind of description. And so for this degree that Neptune's at, it is a majestic rock formation resembling a face is idealized by a boy who takes it as his ideal of greatness, and as he grows up begins to look like it. Eventual concrete manifestation of all higher poetic images and enduring truths of the race. Sure culmination of effort. Okay, I know that's not how we talk today, but remember they were written in 1925. And maybe I'll put that in the show notes because I kind of think you have to read it a couple of times. But if you can just kind of imagine, there's like this rock formation that it is a thing of nature, but it resembles a face. And this little boy like sees it and he idealizes it as if it were a face. And as he grows up, he actually begins to look like it. So that is just very, very kind of creepy and full of a lot of Neptunian things. So I wanted to start there and I'll break it down. But I really feel Neptune to the bone because Neptune is in my first house. So it's really like part of me, like within me. And it's in this square aspect to my sun. So I really had to learn how to work with those two energies constantly just running into each other in this 90-degree angle. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looked like later. But I think that Sabian symbol, it also gets to these key concepts that we associate with Neptune, like words like spiritual, mysticism, illusions, delusions, how we fit into the whole of the universe, what lies beneath, blurring of lines, escapism. And as with all the planets' archetypes, there is a cautionary tale as well. And for Neptune, it is that if we don't know who we are, we may allow ourselves to blur into something we are not. So kind of like that little boy in the channeled image. And the other theme that Sabian symbol shows is idealization to the point of delusion. So those are, I think, things that we don't often think about, and part of it is because there is that fine line in spirituality between belief and delusion. And obviously we could probably think of, cults and things like that. And I was thinking in my recent experience that when I practice mediumship, I have to trust what is coming through from spirit. Yet there's always this shred of a doubt, like, am I just imagining all of this? Because it seems so, it just seems so far-fetched that, I could be doing that. But I have to get over it and have that trust, which leads to this other major Neptunian concept. Because at some point, we all have some spiritual experience. At least I hope we do. Whether it is that, I've had so many of those mediumship experiences where there are just things that I could not possibly know. And they come to me either, in an image or a knowing or just a whisper. And, your spiritual experience, maybe it was like looking at the Grand Canyon or having a baby or seeing that recent eclipse or just a wildlife encounter, looking into some wild animal's eyes. And when we have those moments, I think it really makes us wonder, like, wait a minute, how are all of these things possible? How is it so magical? Like, and how are we on this, rock spinning around here? And how is that related to the greater whole and all of those things? So that is also why Neptune is associated with spirituality, because of you have to question when you're looking at illusion, delusion, idealization, etc. When you get far enough into anything, you're kind of confronted with the beauty that that when things are looked at closely enough, or when you see how big things are, there is this beauty that seems almost impossible and must come from some greater design. And then from a practical perspective, if Neptune plays prominently in your birth chart, you may be very imaginative or drawn to the mystical. And when I say like plays prominently, that would be if Pisces, if you're a Pisces rising, or, a Pisces sun or a Pisces moon, or you have, Neptune is in some kind of major aspect to your sun or your moon or your rising, or if you have a lot of planets in the 12th house, it could make for a very kind of prominent Neptune theme for your life. So again, you may be very imaginative or just drawn to mystical things. You may also have a hard time just being seen, and where like people, like you're right there and people just look over you, or they don't even see you, but they see like the next person in line behind you or whatever. And that's why that I thought that was funny about the discovery of Neptune and how it was just hidden in plain sight. It took them a few tries to actually be like, oh yeah, there it is, right where we calculated it would be. You may idealize people and situations, just like that little boy in the Sabian symbol. Like, you may see things that aren't actually there, and then they become these realities, and you may be blurred into that. Or you may be drawn to just escape. Neptune also rules dreams and is associated with alcohol abuse. And I had major issues around both of those themes, with being unable to quit alcohol despite trying so many times for years and years. And then thankfully finally being able to. But also I had nightmares and sleep paralysis for like 10 years, and nightmares going back to childhood, but the sleep paralysis really serious for about 10 years. So Neptune was on my ass for sure. And thankfully, I think like Pluto kind of intervened for me and caused some of those transformations that had to happen for me to get on with my life, thankfully. Now, let's go through some specifics by looking at Neptune through the houses. And you can also somewhat apply these like to the signs of the zodiac by equating the first house with Aries, and then the second house with Taurus, the third with Gemini, and so on. And if you're not sure which sign associates with which house, you can Google it. Just be careful that when you Google the zodiac wheel, oftentimes the image, they don't pay attention to the proper order of the signs. So you'll want to go to like, a reputable astrology site like astro.com or AstroSeek or Cafe Astrology, or Chani. And I think I still have a resource on my website as well, which lists all the houses and signs. And with these outer planets, so again, it used to be that we associate, let me back up here. Sometimes the planets that are also called inner planets, they're your more personal planets. So you may see them called inner planets or personal planets, and those are the ones that stick closer to the sun. So they're going to change sign more frequently because they're kind of moving around with the sun, similar to Earth. And so those are Mercury, Venus, and Mars. And then the outer planets, or some people call them, I guess, the interpersonal planets, those would be your Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Okay, so with those outer planets, because they remain in the same sign for so long, many of your like peers and people who were born, around the same time, even up to a chunk of years, like by the time we get to Pluto, lots of people are going to share that sign. So that's why they're called interpersonal, or interpersonal. Sorry. But of course the house is very changeable because the sun is moving, we're moving around the sun. So the sun's moving around the zodiac wheel, and the rising sign changes all of the houses for someone's chart. So I'm going to go through Steven Forrest's descriptions again of Neptune through the houses. But first, I thought I would just pull out a little bit from medical astrology. So as I mentioned, I think maybe the last episode or the one before that, I've been in my year 1 program of herbalism, and part of what I'm doing as an elective is medical astrology. And this description that I'm going to read is from Judith Hill's excellent book, which is Medical Astrology, A Guide to Planetary Pathology. And there's so much more information in that book and in her other books. But what she says is Neptune's domain includes gas leaks, viruses, hidden poisons, contagious illness, and psychic suggestion, hypnosis, fatigue, sleeping. Neptune is the planet of sleep, and his transits to important planets produce drowsiness. He confuses and clouds any issue, making correct diagnosis problematic. So yikes. And again, with Neptune in my first house, that is, myself, because that's what the first house is about. It's your kind of survival, your very being. And I find it interesting that I have had those chronic sleep issues, and I've had these really like difficult to diagnose medical problems, especially when I've been going through stress. And I bet if I looked back, maybe Neptune was making some aspect. And eventually I became a hypnotist, which she mentioned hypnosis in there as well. So again, Neptune was driving some of my life before I even knew about astrology. So here are the descriptions from Steven Forrest, The Book of Water, Healing, Regeneration, and Recovery. And let's see here. And the way, again, you would use this information, you would want to look at your birth chart and see which house, so from 1 to 12, which house Neptune is in. Or what you can do is look at your birth chart, and then you can look at where Pisces is and go to the end of that, because Neptune right now is at 29 degrees Pisces, at the end of Pisces. And so you can see which house the transiting Neptune is in your chart, and whether it's doing anything, say, with your sun, like is it making a square to your sun, or is it conjunct, things like that. And as a reminder, you can, if you don't have your birth chart, you can download it for free at a lot of online sites, and then it may even give you a table and show you like 1 through 12 which planets are in there, and you can find Neptune. So the first house, I have to follow my own spiritual path, even if others believe it is selfish and I fail to live up to others' expectation and requirements. And oof, yes, this is me. After first numbing myself to spirit with spirits, with alcohol, um, and that is kind of a trap that you can fall into if you're like, I can't deal with what's before me, whether it's just reality or your spiritual voice telling you to wake up. In the second house, I may need to invest some resources in my spiritual journey. If I don't, I may find stagnation because I didn't believe in myself or what I truly needed to evolve. And this is kind of showing this theme with the second house, which is associated with Taurus and Venus, and kind of, again, applying that lens of Neptune with its highest vibration representing, our spiritual journey. And then third house, I may perceive mystical messages and will need to communicate with others who understand and be teachers to me. If I keep it to myself, I will become confused and my speech will reflect that confusion. Fourth house, in the quiet haven of home, I can connect with my soul family or ancestral lineage for guidance. If I fail to tap into this resource, I may become a sort of walking ghost, just going through the motions of familial tasks. And for the fifth house, I need to incorporate play, joy, and creativity in my spiritual journey. If I deny this, I may use my appetites for play to escape reality altogether. And the sixth house, I develop a spiritual practice that sustains me on a daily basis. It could be through service, and it may involve spiritual mentors along the way. If I don't, I may become disillusioned with those who I serve on a daily basis and lose my why. This is the seventh house. I identify like-minded kindred spirits so I can connect to who I can connect to on a soul level. I don't pretend the connection isn't there. If I neglect this requirement for a soul level connection or overlook signs that it is not there, I may end up with someone unhealthy for me. So I've heard other astrologers kind of call Neptune in the seventh house like a Disney syndrome where, you're looking for that fairy tale, even if you have to delude yourself into it being. The eighth house, I encounter deep experiences with life force in order to renew. So remember, the eighth house is associated with Pluto and things like rebirth and, death, birth, sex, other people's money. Okay. It may be through sexual encounters or experiences with sacred objects or places that just give me goosebumps. If I avoid this, I may place faith in the wrong people or things and end up depressed or drained. Ninth house, I need to open my mind up to expansive spiritual ideas, moments, places through travel or learning. If I remain on the level of religion, I miss out on growth. So it's pointing out, the difference between organized religion and spirituality. 10th house, I may naturally be a spiritual leader, whatever that looks like for me, as I humbly share my gifts with those who would benefit from leadership. And I need to avoid becoming a self-important guru or a spokesperson for God. 11th house, I will find a group of friends or allies who are on the same spiritual wavelength as I am. If I don't and instead focus only on social groups, I do not learn, and life with my group can become superficial or escapist. 12th house. This is like the big kahuna. I understand that I need solitary time to nurture the deep connection to source or spirit or God or whatever you like to call it, that I naturally feel. If I deny this, I may just escape or become closed off. Okay, so all of those, Neptune is pretty deep, and takes, I think, just a lot of exploring, because it can be hidden from us. And also, you know, when there are planets in your 12th house, often those parts of yourself that those planets represent, those are kind of hidden as well, hidden from you. So it's really important, if you do want to keep evolving, and if you're listening to this podcast, I'm guessing you want to. So it is important that you explore your Neptune. And I think for next week, I'll do a hypnotic track that is around Neptune, and maybe connecting to the universe, or to that spiritual side of us. So I will be working on that. And just a reminder, if you like this podcast, please share it with other people who you think would be interested. I do like to think that if more people understood astrology, they just would be so much more self-compassionate, and that in turn makes them more compassionate to others. And if you want to personally work with me, just visit my website, marialuz.online, or email me info@marialuz.online. I am just having a Neptune foggy brain day. And yeah, I offer astrology readings, or I guess more like consultations if you have specific things that you want to look at. And I also do past life regression and other hypnosis where you want to transform different beliefs or patterns that you may have experienced through your life and want to move on from. And I put the references in the show notes. And you are now empowered to be consciously curious about Neptune. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.